Hizmet means service, and that means that you actually put into action the words instead of just preaching, instead of self-congratulatory events, instead of pointing fingers outward. Hizmet's interfaith activities are amazing. With the Hizmet movement, probably. My name is Phyllis Bernard. I am a professor of law at Oklahoma City University School of Law, and I am a very fortunate person to have been a friend of the Hizmet movement for some time now. I came to know the Hizmet movement primarily because of what is now the Turkish raindrop house, although I must say we call it the rainbow house a lot of times, not only because of the colors, but because it's special. It embodies a lot of dreams. And my husband, who teaches world religion, and I were invited through the interfaith dialogue group to travel to Turkey. It was life-changing, especially for a legal scholar and for a person who has been involved in very high levels of public policy at the national level, serving on the board of directors for a corporation that ends up needing a lot of STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. The educational focus of the Hizmet schools was particularly striking for me. As some people would say, the way I grew up, you will know a tree by its fruit. The fruit of the Hizmet movement, as I have studied it and as I have observed it, including and maybe especially here in my town of Oklahoma City, is extremely positive. Hizmet means service, and that means that you actually put into action the words instead of just preaching, instead of self-congratulatory events, instead of pointing fingers outward, which unfortunately is what I think I see with many organizations that proclaim to be about making the world a better place. Instead, Hizmet very humbly and very quietly just goes about making it so. I am so glad I am not Mr. Fethullah Gulen because he lives a very difficult life. He has no home. But then again, truly none of us has, since this is not really our home. This level of existence is not home. There's something more that we're here for. But it would be more comfortable, one would think, to be able to be in one's homeland. And yet that's not everybody's destiny. I think of Mr. Gulen as very similar to the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese monk who was exiled from Vietnam because he believed that no matter what your political party was, no matter what your faith tradition is, that you deserved to have compassion and mercy and health and healing and education. And he was exiled from his country for believing that. So he's never really been able to go back. And yet, in many ways, both with regard to Mr. Gulen and others like himself, that was a great blessing for the rest of the world, because otherwise the message would have stayed in a much more limited part of the globe. instead of being dispersed everywhere. And so I'm sad for him. I'm glad for us. I probably could not speak about Mr. Gulen himself. I can speak about his impact on people that I have come to know. Again, trying to draw some analogies. I think of him as one of those great leaders who came along at just the right time to inspire a generation at a pivotal time in not only the history of Turkey, but of the world. Because he was able to reach out to people who were otherwise not a part of the privileged classes. He was able to encourage people to believe that they were worthy because God made them worthy, not because somebody in a higher socioeconomic or political or aristocratic status said so, but because God made you so. And that in return, you have an obligation to grow and develop and make this world a better place so that everybody has more of those same benefits and blessings that were given to you. That was a message that was for everybody, period. It wasn't reserved for the doctors, the lawyers, or a particular, well, my great-grandmother's people were from India, caste, I would say. And that's a revolutionary message. And a revolution like that carries forward through education. And the more people who believe in themselves, believe in a higher obligation, duty, and mission, see education as a sacred obligation and duty, and give back to others instead of just holding on to it for themselves, that's a very special way of approaching the world. That is the Hizmet movement. I think that Hizmet's interfaith activities are amazing. I have nothing but gratitude, and I am deeply humbled by the commitment that Hizmet members have made in terms of contributions of time and money and energy in order to facilitate not only the dialogues locally, but especially the visits to Turkey itself. I'm not sure sometimes whether people realize how important those visits are. I consider myself to be a fairly intelligent global person. You can look at my resume and that's how it would read. But at least in my generation, and I'm a Cold War baby, we weren't taught anything about from Istanbul farther east. Istanbul north was nothing but a huge pink blob that said Soviet Union. And Istanbul as a modern country, as a part of a modern country, did not exist in the psychological map of my generation. And then lastly, in terms of the geopolitical importance of Turkey, at least for me, until I was physically there and understood Europe, Asia. Here's the bridge. Black Sea, Russia. Until then, I actually didn't get it. I think it's important for people to go there and to see what difference it makes in a country that has made a commitment to education as first priority, not military. What people are taught matters, how well they are taught. The emphasis on STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, the education that's needed for success in the 21st century, added to the discipline, added to the learning about cooperation and respect for women as your teachers and administrators. That's magnificent. That changes things. As a person who comes from many generations of educators and many generations of women who had to struggle for respect, to see the Hizmet and Hizmet-inspired schools operating as they do, especially bringing together the children from conflict zones. I keep thinking, oh, please let me see one of the schools in Liberia where I had been. Let me see some of the schools in Rwanda where I had been. Let me see some of the schools in Congo, in Kenya. And I will look at those places as these are the seeds planted that in 20 years are going to be the foundation for an entirely new society. Is Hizmet too good to be true? I spent most of a book chapter on exploring that in the book that's coming out spring of 2015, University of California Press, titled Hizmet Means Service. My task was to take work that I had done previously, to examine it rigorously, not as somebody who considers herself to be something of a friend to the Hizmet movement, but with the rigorous eye of a legal scholar. What I saw just increased how much impressed I was, because I would poke and I would push and I would ask the questions. And then, for whatever reasons, mostly having to do with publication costs and issues, time kept dragging on. And so what I was examining at the beginning was not what I examined at the end. At the beginning, frankly, Hizmet was very popular amongst business people. Everybody wanted to be a part of the Confederation of Turkish business people that were associated with Hizmet, and I was asking the question myself, are they members because it's popular? Are they members because this is a way of getting business referrals? Are they members because they are afraid that maybe there is some deal making going on in the back rooms, and if they're not there, they'll be cut out of the deal? Frankly, that's the standard operating procedure for doing business in many settings, including here in Oklahoma. It's called the good old boy system. Okay. Back east, amongst the Ivy League schools where I got my education and in our law firms, they would consider it to be the club. Are you a member of the club? But everybody does it, except Hizmet. And that's what makes it very difficult for people to understand.
Mr. Gulen has a long history of working with educators who are trying to blend Western forms of the sciences and humanities into more traditional value education forms, more dominant in the Muslim world.
Hizmet really makes an effort to reach out to other faiths, and it has looked for ways that other faiths can share their understanding, and also that they can be receptive to the message that Islam can bring. And